Welcome back to the We Are Already Free podcast. I have a question for you. What if pushing yourself to the peak in your success, in your physical successes, whether that's externally in terms of your material success or in terms of your body, what if all that pushing is actually moving you further away from true, deep, integrated, innate strength? Today's guest learned this the hard way as a Navy SEAL with at one point 1.8% body fat. He looked perfect on paper, but was battling intense physical pain. In a world where more feel empty despite their external achievements, where success often comes at the cost of our actual well-being, we need a new way to think about strength and healing and being well, being vibrant humans. In this episode, we'll explore how you can break free from this exhausting cycle of physical, emotional performance, always feeling like you've got to put on the mask and show yourself in a certain way. It's freaking exhausting. And we're going to share with our guest today, with Christopher, practical tools you can use to integrate true well-being without sacrificing your drive, without sacrificing that desire to show up fully in the world as a motivated, connected human. Christopher Maher bridges worlds, from Navy SEAL to master healer, from extreme physical achievement to profound wisdom gained studying traditional Chinese medicine and training with Grandmaster Mantak Chia and much more. So thank you for being here. You're in the right place, and welcome back to the We Are Already Free podcast. When you hear the words, "we are already free," what comes up for you?
Acceptance.
Change.
A shift in awareness.
Human beings are so powerful.
There's so much more.
Everything is love behind it.
Breaking the chains of your own mind.
That which remains.
Nature.
Getting out of the matrix.
We're sitting on the treasure and it's already unlocked.
We are already free.
You're free.
You are a walking map.
Have always been free.
You are always free, already free.
We are already free.
Hello, brother Christopher. Welcome onto the podcast. It's an honor to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. You have a great voice, man.
Thank you very much. I'm now trying to make it even better.
Yeah, it's almost like a radio DJ.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much. I mean, I guess it's a good thing I'm doing a podcast then.
Yeah, it's great. That's a perfect place to share your gift.
Nice, man. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming on. Really, reading your bio is quite an inspiring thing, and I admit, a little intimidating as well. It's like, this dude has walked a serious path, and I'm just honored that we get to have you here on the podcast. So I think for me, the piece that's jumping out as like the part that wants to be explored here is this idea of, as I said in the intro, external success. You know, this idea of, even from a physical perspective, having this chiseled, toned body, or in other ways, having all the money or having the cars or the trophy wife or all these external signs of validation. And yet so many are internally just feeling lost and feeling broken and in pain, whether physically or emotionally or both. And I'd love to know, what was it that you were chasing in those early days when you had that 1.8% body fat, when you were that ripped dude who was like ticking all the boxes on paper? What was it you were trying to get? What was it you were after? And did you get it trying that way?
You know, it's interesting. For me, I think what I wanted was recognition of value. The reason why I left the SEAL teams is because a buddy of mine was at SEAL Team 2, and he wanted to transfer to the West Coast, which is where SEAL Team 5 is. And I talked to him, and he said, listen, they're going to ship my effects. So my car, my clothes, and all my stuff for my house out to SEAL Team 5, and SEAL Team 2 was going to pay for his. And when I went in to inform SEAL Team 5 that I had found someone who wanted to shift duty stations with me, was from my same BUDS class. BUDS means Basic Underwater Demolition / SEAL Training. And I needed them to ship my effects. They said they weren't going to do it, that I had to pay for it out of pocket. And I think in that moment, I thought, hold on. I'm in the SEAL teams. He's in the SEAL teams. We're both switching duty stations. SEAL Team 2 is going to come up with the money to ship him over here, and you can't come up with the money to ship me over there. This doesn't feel fair and equitable. And so I went home and I sat on that and I thought to myself, when were the stars really aligned in my life? Like when was everything working out? And it was when I was training in track and field. And it just seemed like I was searching for balance. I was searching for recognition. So I said, look, if they're not going to give me the recognition of value that I need, then I'll go seek it on my own. And I went home for Christmas vacation, and I decided halfway through that I was going to go to the National Amphibious Base, and I was going to check out of the SEAL teams because I'd already served all of my time, and I had 90 days of vacation on the books. So I said, why don't I just trade that vacation time in for money? And I left. Wow. And I decided to go out on my own and see really if I could create a situation that allowed me to get what I was seeking, which was recognition of value.
Wow, that's a big one. That's a big one, recognition of value. And so do you feel like, so when you were in the Navy SEALs, and I imagine there were multiple layers to this because there's always nuance and multiple layers, but was a part of that, the Navy SEALs, like it was that same thing, I want recognition of value, like that to know that I have value in the world? Was that a part of that? And then you kind of weren't getting in the way you wanted there. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to try it somewhere else now.
Well, I think for me, part of my instinct and part of my intuition is that I already knew I had value. What I wanted was for them to understand that I had equal value. And because they basically broke my value system, I said, I no longer want to participate. And I went out on my own to seek my own value, right? To be recognized for my own efforts, to be recognized for my own sacrifices and commitment and time and effort and energy and consciousness and discipline and hard work and commitment, you know, because those are things that were instilled in me when I went to boarding school as a young child. And, you know, I think that once humans understand value, if you feel that things are unfair and inequitable, if you value yourself, you will no longer participate.
And what do you think gave you that intrinsic sense of value? Because there's a lot of people in the world right now who are putting up with a lot of shit, basically, and that if they knew their value, they maybe wouldn't be sort of so-called putting up with it. And I'm wondering, in your case, what was it that gave you that sense that I'm willing to walk away because this isn't valuing who I really am?
Yeah. This is an interesting question. To be honest with you, I'm unsure. I think it was something that I grew into day by day. You know, when you go through a program like SEAL training and you grab that certificate at the end of graduation and you walk across the stage, you've gone through a rite of passage as a male. You've shifted from boy to man, and you understand that I am the creator of my own reality. And I think that in the entirety of that experience, the entirety of, you know, spending 10 years at a privately well-endowed boarding school, living with 15 other guys and figuring out each day where I fit in this system and who I am. And the reason why I wanted to lean back on where I came from is because I worked really hard in order to achieve everything that I've achieved. And what I mean by achievement has to do with things internally. It's an intrinsic value for me, as well as an external value. Because when you're in boarding school, you're a kid, you don't want to be there. That's the last place you want to be. me, I wanted to be home with my friends, ride my bicycle everywhere I wanted to go, and, going out on dates like other kids do in high school. I wanted to have freedom. And so I traded in my freedom in order to learn hard work, discipline, commitment, and being part of something bigger than myself. And when you go through boarding school and you're uncomfortable in that dynamic because you're giving up basic freedoms, well, what I consider basic freedoms, which would be the freedom to choose what I do with my time, you start to build esteem. And that esteem allows you to get a sense of yourself. And when someone sort of breaks your values, right? You're like your code. If you understand who it is you are and what you value, it's difficult to participate in that relationship any longer. And I think, again, it's something that was built into me day after day, bit by bit, piece by piece, experience by experience, meaning it was less of a mental construct and it was an actual experiential experience that took time. You're just to give you an example, boarding school, I was getting up at 5:30 every morning to go out and shovel cow shit, right? And milk cows. And the thing about it is that, Pennsylvania is cold in the wintertime. And you're out there milking these cows when it is, butt ass cold, right? Your hands are freezing. The cow's smacking you in the face with its tail. It's just, all of it is hard work. And I think that helped me build internally a value system that was based on my commitment. And if to go back to my buddy in the SEAL teams, he's committing as much time, energy, effort, and consciousness and effort as I am. And you're telling me that they value him more than you value me. Well, then we're complete. Because I understand my own value.
So this is an interesting one because not necessarily everyone is going to have the opportunity to go to boarding school or to spend 10 years in the SEALs. And so I'm wondering, how could someone listening right now, wherever they are in their journey, and we might be talking to people who have families already, who are in careers, who have been kind of in the grind for a while and are realizing that they don't necessarily live as aligned to a value system as they'd like to. Do you have a sense of ways that people can start to practice that even on a small scale? Maybe the suggestion is go milk cows on a cold morning and build from there. But what is that speaking to? Like, what can people choose in their daily lives that's going to help them, even within the context that maybe they have families and they're already quite full in their lives, and how to start developing that groundwork, that foundation of a value system that they can then rely on or lean on going forward?
I think the most important thing for someone to do in order to intrinsically build value is to do things that make them feel uncomfortable. And let's say, for instance, someone loves pumpkin pie or they love apple pie, right?
Yeah.
But we all know that apple pie is full of sugar, it's full of gluten, it's full of all kinds. And if you're picking it up from the store, it could be full of tons of preservatives, right?
Yeah.
And being uncomfortable is, I'm walking towards the kitchen to get that piece of apple pie, and I stop myself and I go, is this what my body really wants or needs? And guess what? It's uncomfortable because you're choosing to go without your daily reward for the efforts that you gave for the day. Because you know that you have a daughter, she's 12 days old, and you want to be around and as healthy and as vital and as present as humanly possible. Well, in order to do that, you have to give up some of the things that you lean on that go against life extension, right? That go against mental focus, that go against deep internal physiological well-being. And so find the things in your life, look at yourself, assess yourself correctly in the sense of being honest, and then eliminate the things that are dissuading you away from your goals, your desires, your dreams, and the things that you want to experience. Because we all have to give up something that we like to lean on when we're stressed. And when we're stressed, people lean on the daily acceptable drugs, right? Nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, brown or white sugar. And as you start to value your well-being as one of your highest values, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to be uncomfortable when it comes time to manage your stress, because you're going to have to shift from the easily accessible negative stress management tools into the hard-earned efforting positive stress management tools. Because I can either manage my stress with this piece of pumpkin pie and a warm cup of coffee, or I can manage my stress with a 3.5 mile run.
Right.
And so, right. And so what I'm saying is, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And being on a 3.5 mile run is uncomfortable, especially if you've never run 3.5 miles before.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Right. The breath is going to get heavy. The sweat is going to start to pour down. The face is going to get hot. The lactic acid is going to build in the legs and the arms and the back of the neck. And if you're willing to do that, your body says, hey, look, wow, you're really starting to build internal self-esteem. You told yourself something that you would do, and you followed it through to completion, even though it was uncomfortable. And I think if humans, the listeners, are willing to take one thing in their life and look at it in terms of stress management, negative stress management tools or positive stress management tools, and they switch one for one. Okay. And somebody could be using 5 negative stress management tools. But if you're willing this month to take one of them and switch them out for a positive stress management tool like breath work, meditation, exercise, Qigong, Tai Chi, clear communication, deep sleep. Okay. If you're willing to do that, then you're going to start building esteem. And as you start building esteem, you begin to value your word and you begin to value your actions more. And so when you're in relationships, people will begin to lean on you because every nervous system reads every other nervous system in 0.2 seconds. So it knows whether or not this other person has a high level of esteem. And then you can become a leader to yourself. You can become a leader in your family. You can become a leader in your community. You can become a leader in your culture. If you're willing to be uncomfortable and build inner self-esteem by putting away the things that are easy and taking on board the things that are difficult.
I feel like we could just end the episode there, and people have, like, just everything you've just said. If we just walk away with that, people have got absolute gold. But we're not going to end there because I want to hear more of your story. And thank you so much for sharing, by the way. That really resonates with me personally. And as you said earlier, used an example that people listening won't really have context for unless they've been listening to a lot of episodes. But I just became a father recently, 12 days ago to be precise, to a little daughter named Honey. And it's been a wild ride so far. And it is this calling forward, this feeling of, You know, what I prioritize today is going to lead to the life she gets to experience and the father she gets to experience, and that's a really big deal. So I really appreciate you giving those this context and this invitation into challenge. And I really appreciate that. And I actually want to hear more of your story, because it's so interesting to me. It's a bit of a segue, but it's connected. It's because on one side, like you obviously pushed really hard. You had those high values. You did that hard work. And again, there are so many, and I'm speaking a lot to the men in this moment, just because I see that there are so many men in the world. I actually was speaking to a woman recently who was talking about her husband and just saying, he's provided so much for us. He worked so hard, and yet he's actually falling apart. And he's falling apart because he doesn't know how to be intrinsically whole, how to really lean into the support of other brothers, of community, of belonging, of feeling intrinsically worthy. And I want to understand a bit more of your story, because you, again, on paper, you had it all worked out. You had it all sussed. It was all going great. And yet you were experiencing higher and higher levels of pain. So could you kind of take us through really to that breaking point? Because I think that's such a critical moment that so many of us need to experience in our lives. What was happening when everything was good on paper, you were in serious pain, and then you chose a different way? Like, what was going on there?
Yeah, what was going on there is what you brought up about the man you were talking about. And I was part of community, meaning I had teammates, I had people that I loved and I cared for. You know, my ability to relate was really good. My ability to be social and emotional and share what I was feeling, that was good too. The challenge was that I never ever reached out for help from someone else. Right. So I became hyper independent, and that hyper independence drove me to lean too heavily on me. The lone wolf, right? And it's funny because that's what my ex called me. Like the first day she met me, she was like, "Oh, wow, you're a lone wolf." And as a lone wolf, I was part of a pack, but I only leaned on myself. So I showed up for dinner. We had a good time. We had a few laughs. We shared a few stories. But if I needed your assistance, I never had the courage, or I never even really knew that was something to do, because I was on my own since I was 7 years old.
Wow.
And so rather than that being an excuse, that is the life experience that I was dealt. And so I took some things from church and I took them to the extreme, right? So in the boarding school that I went to, it's named Milton Hershey School, and it's in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And they own 51% of the voting stock in Hershey Foods Incorporated, right?
Oh, wow.
So they have plenty of resources, right?
Yeah.
The institution, I think, is worth like $17.8 billion or something ridiculous.
Jeez.
Okay. So when I was at boarding school, every Sunday you had to go to church, right? And the church was non-denominational. And the way that it was structured is they always gave what they considered to be a good positive message. And one of the things that I extrapolated from that experience was God helps those who help themselves.
Right.
Right? Well, what they left out on the other end is God helps those who helps themselves through other people. Okay. And so they left half of the message out, and I started taking on these beliefs with no filter at 7 years old. And I never really questioned them, because when you hear the same messages again and again, you figure I was at boarding school. I probably went to that church 400 plus times and heard that message probably at least 25 or 30 times. Right. And so when you're young and you're in a precognitive state of function, you don't have any way of filtering and questioning the messages that you're hearing. You're just putting them into practice. And I think probably because it's an institution, they were informing us of certain things. They knew one day that we would graduate from school, and then the majority of the children didn't have any parents. And so the message of God helps those who help themselves is a very good, powerful message, because you're going to have to move into the world and you're going to have to figure things out. You're going to have to lean heavily on yourself. And I took those messages to their edge and found that though they were true in one perspective, they were limiting in another. And the limitations that I took from those messages led me to be hyper independent. And that hyper independence led me into a body that was riddled with pain and discomfort. And so I was in pain. I never complained. I never bitched. I never moaned, because at boarding school and in SEAL trainings, in the Navy and in the SEAL teams, those types of institutions are well aware that when one guy is having a difficult day, if he spreads that lower mood that he's in, he could bring everybody else down to where he's feeling. So contain and control, and keep those things to yourself. Share the sunny, bright part of you, and the deeper, darker, painful parts of you, you keep those to yourself. And there were rarely any opportunities to share as a 7 and 8 and 9 and a 10-year-old that I was having difficulty with the situation that I was in. And I built my esteem through those difficult situations. And so I learned to become hyper independent at an emotional level, at a psychological level, at a mental level, at an energetic level. And so I got to experience the limitations of those ideas.
And because I could imagine that when you reach the end of your capacity with that, you're like, I'm doing the hyper individualization. I'm the lone wolf. I can do it all myself. And you obviously having this massive discipline, this capacity to really keep showing up again and again. And yet you reach a point where you're just, as you said, riddled with pain. It's like there must have been some kind of an identity death or a like, I could just imagine this feeling of like, oh dear, this isn't actually working, and needing to completely shift to go almost to be humbled. Is that, I don't know if that's the accurate word, but to need to let go of the identity of the old self to be able to grow into the new self. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. The experience for me was the only way to break hyperindependence is to reach out and ask for help.
Right.
And then once I did that, I called a buddy up that I had been through SEAL training with, that I was in the SEAL teams with, and he came over to my house and he helped me.
Wow.
He brought a yoga mat. He brought a juicer. He taught me how to stretch. He shifted my beverages from beer to juicing.
Oh, wow.
And that made an incredible difference. And then he challenged me. He said, look, I think you need to investigate Rolfing as a form of body work to help you, because he could see that it was impossible for me to get into any of the yogic positions with any level of mastery at all. I mean, I was as tight as a piano string. and so I'm watching him and he is free flowing.
Right.
And so it was a very frustrating, let's say, 2 hours. I gave my best effort, as I always do. But the thing that I gained most from that experience was I reached out for help and someone helped me. And then he led me down to investigate. And I reached out to the next person. I asked for help. And then I got on this path of, when someone helps me, why don't I ask them if they know someone else who could help me? And so I went the exact opposite direction.
Wow. I really love that story, and I'm so glad that you brought that forward, because that's what I'm seeing more and more. So I've been working as a transformational coach now for some years, and it was actually a calling for many, many years before. I was a independent professional musician, and I was called to this kind of style of work a long time ago, and I ignored it completely because I had a whole other idea of what my life was going to be around being a professional musician, etc. And I finally surrendered to it. And then just recently have realized I really want to lean into supporting more men, more of the brothers, more of those who have ticked many of the boxes of life, but are still struggling in that space of like, why am I not getting that, as you said, that reciprocal value sense that like I'm performing, I'm doing all the things, I'm the hardcore dude who's like got his shit together, but why do I feel so empty and alone? And what I'm noticing, and I've only been kind of making this shift quite recently, deepening into this calling, I'm already noticing how many men just struggle to ask for help, like how big a deal this actually is. So what you've said is just huge. It's so huge. And how, as you asked for help once and received it, and this is part of the challenge, is because there is always a risk, especially for those who don't currently have support networks. It depends on who we ask for help from. Like that some people might initially ask for help from someone who doesn't have the capacity to actually sit with that and support them in that. So I just really appreciate you bringing that forward. Like, I guess for me, it would be the suggestion or the invitation would be to see someone who is aligning in the ways that you dream of aligning, like Christopher, for example, someone who's walked that path, who has these skills, who's dedicated this time. Ask that kind of person for help, and just be wary of just leaning, like maybe your wife might not be the best person to ask for help, for example. Like it depends on where you're at in the journey, but making sure of the quality. Like if you're in the pub drinking beers with your mates, like asking one of them for help might not be the best thing, but really being discerning in that initial point, because that feeling, and I resonate with it so deeply as well, of reaching that point of saying, I need help, when that's to the right person, it's a complete revolutionary moment. It changes everything. So yeah, I just really appreciate you bringing that forward, Christopher.
Oh, well, I'm happy to share because, in order to be free for me, part of freedom, you have to lean on the liver. And in traditional Chinese medicine, the liver's the helper.
Wow.
Okay. And so I needed help. I was good at helping myself, which is the feminine part of helpfulness. And I needed to learn how to ask help from others. And I needed to learn how to help others. And so my transformational journey was about coming in union with my liver and the high qualities of the liver. That groundedness, that rootedness in myself, and then those branches that reach out and invite the wind to come in and blow the leaves off of the limbs, right? This symbiotic exchange of energy and consciousness and love and care, and mostly consideration.
Oh, man. So can you actually take us through a little bit? Because what you've just said is obviously coming from some of that training that you went through around traditional Chinese medicine. And as I hear you speak, I hear a deeply what's the word? Symbolic and archetypal and metaphorical connection to reality, which I think is, and spiritual really. And having come from, as you said, some of those messages you took on from boarding school of like, just, you got to do it all yourself. God helps those who help themselves. And then going into Navy SEALs where you had that community, but you had it to the extent where you felt connected in that environment, but you couldn't ask for help. And then moving into asking for help and being in a space now where there's clearly a deep spiritual language that you are navigating, that you're speaking through. Could you take us through a little bit of that journey from you? Or that, like, so you asked for help, you got the help you needed from one person, and you started asking for more help and moving down these kind of various connections, asking for help. What is it that brought you to this space? I mean, because you said you studied with Mantak Chia, and I think most people listening, or many people listening, won't know who Mantak Chia is. But Mantak Chia is is it Taoist, or is it like Taoist. a sexual master, basically using sexual energy, the spiritual life force energy of sexuality to empower ourselves, especially as men. And so I'm just so curious to hear about your transition from what sounds like quite a practical approach to life and a very sort of physical approach to one that sounds more metaphysical, I suppose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as a child, I was always philosophical.
Okay.
Right? That's an innate landing point for me.
Right.
Meaning I'm always analyzing. I was always coming up with my own philosophies from a very young age about reality. And then I took on some other people's philosophies, and I found out the limitations of those philosophies. When I got into the body and I started to get the education on the organs, on the electromagnetic channels, on the spiritual sense of what could be possible, it started to match up really with my love of poetry. And so I combined my discipline with my love of philosophy and poetry into integrating these deep levels of Christian, Buddhist, Taoist, allopathic, holistic, and I started to synthesize all of those together to develop a more complete whole.
Wow.
And that led me to generate a new language in the world, to begin to speak on the purpose for me being created and brought here to this planet in this unique time that we have today. And so I immersed myself, because if you are a friend of mine and you take time out of your day to teach me something, I take that quite seriously. And I'm going to take what you teach me to my edge to see the efficacy of it and what it produces in terms of an overall experience. And then if it produces something profound, I'm going to share that with anyone who will listen to me, in hopes that it adds a similar amount of value to their life. And so the synthesis of that excited me every day, because I was learning from the inside out. You would teach me something, I would take what you taught me, I would put it into practice, and then I would see what was the effect on my energy. What was the effect on me psychologically? What was the effect on me emotionally? What was the effect on me instinctually? And I was inside of a playhouse that sort of worked for all the different forms of innate intelligence that I had. So it was like a musician who picks up a guitar, his buddy teaches him a few chords, he goes home, and now I have 5 hours of interrupted time to myself, and I play these 4 chords to death, right? Until my fingers, right, are building welts on the tips. And you know what this is like, right?
Oh, yeah.
And in that process of discovery, by the time I hit hour 2 and hour 3, I'm already creating from my own sense of myself. And by the time I hit hour 4, I'm already writing songs, right? By the time I hit hour 5, I'm already recording with my phone these songs. So I took a little bit of that energy and that they gave me, and I maximized the experience of it. I fully immersed myself. And that's what happened with the transformational, healing, personal growth journey. I immersed myself into take every one of these things that I learned to their edge to see how they were affecting me. And each day that I engrossed myself in these practices, I became more intelligent instinctually. I became more intelligent energetically. I became more intelligent emotionally. I became more intelligent psychologically. And each day, my perspectives, they were shifting, they were growing, they were deepening, they were getting more broad. And I was understanding reality from a completely different position every single day, because I was putting in 5 to 6 hours a day, every day for 7 years. And so imagine if you had love of instrument at like 2 years old, and your parents gave you a new instrument every 3 months, and they allowed you to just simply explore unencumbered your experience of those instruments, how that would impact you. And what benefited me is my sense of independence, right? My sense of sovereignty. And so I was able to take everything that I was learning and build a life from it, and feel confident that I could shift into any direction that I wanted to. And then one day I woke up and then God said, listen, the universe said, listen, the source said, listen, I need you to get out of the driver's seat, and I need you to get in the passenger seat. And I need to let me use you as a tool to be able to create deep, true levels of transformation for people, because this is what the world needs right now. And I said, okay, I'll get in the driver's seat. You tell me what to do. And so I learned. And because I spent so much time questioning, so much time efforting, so much time investigating the limitations of transformational systems. And I became the message that I was here to deliver. Anyone can be a messenger. That's easy, right? Pick up a book, read it, and then share with other people the things you learned in the book. It's very difficult to become the message. Like at some point in your musical journey, there may have been a day where you felt like, I think I have become music, right? I understand the recording. I understand the creation. I understand songwriting. I can have a feeling and translate that into music within an hour. And so at some point, I became transformation. I became healing. I became growth. And then when I did that, God said, yeah, but I'm the leader. So you watch how I do this, and you learn from me now. And I said, cool. Let's get after it. And then my ability to create transformation for myself, and my ability to help co-create transformation with others went exponential. And then suddenly all of these complex cases began showing up at my doorstep. And people who'd never shared their difficulties, people who'd never honestly reached out for help before. And here I was, now the leader on that journey where I began as a pupil.
And how does your work, when you work with people, because there's obviously different modalities that you've taken on. So like say if I or someone listening was going, okay, I want to, like this is resonating with me. I'm wanting to move from this place of like intense effort or disconnection or feeling like I have to do it all alone. I need support. I want to come into a more intrinsic, holistic, embodied state of being. Please help, Christopher. What is the kind of, because I think you talked about true body intelligence. Is that the name of what you do? Like what does it look like just on, I know it would be different depending on the person, but is there like a way to describe it?
Yeah, there's a way to describe it. The first step really is, I encourage them, or I form them, I let them know, look, if you want to have a connection call, you need to read my book, Free for Life. And they do. And then they call me and we sit down, we have a conversation. And then I let them know that I can help them, regardless of how dynamic or dire their situation is. I feel extremely confident that we can break through and get them on the other side of whatever's keeping them from being what you term very well, fully embodied, intrinsically coming from a place of sovereignty. And then they come to California, they fly into LA, and they sit with me. And the most important part of that process is they come here probably a month or maybe 2, sometimes 3 months after we've had that initial conversation. And they are sitting in that chair with an idea of these problems that they have that they want solved.
Right.
And I need to figure out, why are they really here? Like, okay, I hear your problems. I understand there's a speed bump in your way. I'm uninterested in that. I need to investigate them. And I investigate them for about 2 hours. And then we figure out, why are you really here? Like, the bait is the problem. It's impossible for me to turn my head to the left, and so I'm not allowed to drive anymore. Okay, I get it. But is that the real reason why you're sitting in the chair? And 100 times out of 100, we find out that the real reason why they're there is because there's something that they want to be in. There's some way in which they want to be, or there's something that they want to do in their life that they somehow got off track from. Because, yeah, you can be motivated by pain, but there's a limitation to that. Right. I want to figure out what motivates you from love. Like, what is it that you truly value at a soul essence? Like, why did you really come here? And we have to figure that out. And once we figure that out, then they set a beautiful intention. And then I have this enormous toolbox full of tools that will help them get to where they're going by simply stripping away what essentially is unnatural. Well, the question is, well, what could you term unnatural? Anxiety. It's an unnatural state of function. Anger, hate, rage. It's an unnatural state of function. Self-righteousness. It's an unnatural state of function. Fear. It's an unnatural state of function if we consider function, the highest function, to be freedom. Because when I'm in freedom, I'm in excitement. When I'm in freedom, I'm in righteous behavior. When I'm in freedom, I'm in love. When I'm in freedom, I'm in confidence. When I'm out of freedom, I'm in the polar opposites of those things. And so I've been able to develop systems that reduce their lifetime accumulated stress load and all the stuff that makes them feel anxious and all the stuff that makes them feel angry and all the stuff that makes them feel worthless and all the stuff that makes them feel fearful and all the stuff that makes them feel self-righteous. I've developed systems that reduce those stress loads by 50% so they can experience for the very first time who they would have become had they been able to successfully transcend their parents' inner deficiencies, insecurities, limiting beliefs, and fears. And then I teach them how to do that to themselves because I want to have an interdependent relationship with them. Because part of the purpose of Source creating me and inviting me here to come to Earth to serve was to break the codependent, dependent nature between patients and practitioners, coaches and clients, students and teachers. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's a big one. That's like we could do an entire series of podcast episodes just on that, what you just said there. I'm curious because you've spoken to this a lot, and I realize time has actually flown way faster than I anticipated. But you've spoken to this a lot, and obviously your book, it's in the title of your book, and maybe there's nothing else to add, but you keep referring to freedom. And obviously this podcast is called We Are Already Free. And actually you probably wouldn't know this because most people don't, but this title of this podcast came from the title of a poem that I wrote during the lockdowns. The title of the poem was We Are Already Free. And so, yeah, I feel you on the poetry, brother. But in this moment, I really just want to ask you, when you hear the words, we are already free, what does that bring up for you? it brings up motivation to assess myself, to look at the places where I'm stuck, where I'm stagnant, where I am without footing, where I'm fearful, where I'm dishonest, where I am unclear, where I am checked out. I hear that as an invitation to get checked in where I'm absent.
Full power. Thank you so much. And just to honor your work, where can people, like, what is the stuff you want people to know about for you right now? I know you said you got your book, or like, where can people find you? What's the, if they're going, I need to get more Christopher in my life, what's the next step?
I mean, the very first step, honestly, is to read Free for Life, right? It's a small investment. And once you get that education around this unique path that I've created, and you're really seeking freedom from the inside out, you have to know how to get there. Like, knowledge is power when it's applied. Otherwise, what you have is information taking up space in your head. And so I want them to go there and read the book. I want them to go to the website, truebodyintelligence.com, so they can start to ask themselves about, where am I stuck? Where am I lacking freedom? Where are my fears? Where are my inner deficiencies? Where are my insecurities? What are my limiting beliefs? So they have an opportunity to experience what I experience every day, which is a complete and whole sense of freedom.
Great, thank you. And I'll put that into the show notes on a practical note for anyone listening. If you want to go and check out those links, I do recommend it. And yeah, thank you, brother. As I said, the time has flown here, and I want to respect our our clock here. But I really just appreciate you coming on and sharing so much gold. And I for me, there's a lot of takeaways in my own journey and the path I'm currently walking. Is there anything else that you would like to close with, to leave us with? Do you feel complete, or anything else?
Yeah. You can obviously find me on Instagram under Christopher Lee Maher. But the thing that I want to end with most is, you asked me earlier before we got on the podcast, did I have a favorite podcast?
Yeah.
And this by far has been my favorite.
Oh, wow.
And there's a reason why it's been my favorite. Because your level of care and consideration, the space that you hold, the passion and the place that you're coming from, and the embodiment that you are, and the awareness that you have, has made it this way. And it's been such a pleasure to be able, to surf this wave with you, to add value to other people's lives. You're thoughtful, you're careful, and all of this means a lot to you. And that comes across to me in a very strong way. And I appreciate the invitation to be able to come here and co-create with you. I'm really grateful for you and all the good work that you've done on yourself and the man that you are choosing to become.
Dang, dude. You just went straight for the heart there. I did not expect that. Thank you so much. That means,
you're so welcome.
That means everything, really, because it is as you know, it's a hard path at times, doing the things that, I'll speak for myself. I can only speak for myself, in that I find it a really hard path sometimes to keep doing the things that I believe in, including this podcast, which I love so much. And at times I think, what the fuck am I doing? I should be a bloody lawyer or accountant or something that has a guaranteed income, because it's a tough one at times. So thank you for the reflection. It really, you really just, I'm feeling a bit speechless, which is unusual for me. Cool.
So the last thing I'll say, no risk it, no biscuit.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
That's it.
Was it? That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm going to throw you off into the green room again. And if you have a moment, please do stick around. We'll chat a little for a little decompression after. But I'm for now gonna say farewell to our guests. And yeah, thanks again, brother. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, lovely humans. Well, as you can tell, I'm all aflutter after that incredible conversation with Christopher. I mean, yeah, just so beautiful to see someone who has walked so many of the paths that our society offers and is now coming from a place where his languaging is so poetic, where it's so much about this kind of incredible, mysterious path that we're all walking. And how do we walk it with grace? How do we walk it with courage, with truth, with alignment? I'm certainly taking away from this that it's so critical to continue choosing the hard, good things. Like, as he said, you know, you've got the choice between your apple pie or between maybe going to bed earlier or eating something that makes you feel really good deep inside of yourself. And those choices are every day in great and small ways, and they matter. So I hope that you walk away from this making one of those choices in a better direction for yourself from this. I certainly will. And I really invite and recommend that you connect further with Christopher's work. I will put some links into the show notes, but otherwise go to his website and all the rest. Find him on Instagram, etc., and just follow the links in the show notes. That's always easiest. And if this lovely brother's story resonates, you know, especially his path from pushing too hard to finding true balance, do take a moment to reflect on where you might be sacrificing well-being for achievement, for pushing, for mask wearing, for performing in the world. And please ask for help. I think if there's one takeaway from this whole thing that is like the deepest, most important of all, is that it's okay to ask for help. Not only is it okay to ask for help, it's freaking necessary. It's like one of the key places of transformation. I remember a previous guest saying that transformation, 80% of transformation is showing up. And it's a lot easier to show up when we have support on the path. Otherwise, we're just like alone in isolation, and so much of our wounding has happened in isolation. The healing happens in connection. So please gift yourself that. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Dear listener, it is a pleasure to be here with you. I look forward to more. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Christopher again. And please remember, as always, we are already free. I'll see you next week.